This video will have spoilers for Squirrel Stapler, The Exit 8, and Duck Season. Alright, indie horror games are just interactive paintings. What do I mean by that? Well, what I think I'm really trying to say is that indie horror games are the next logical step from what we consider now as surrealist art into the digital age. Now, when I'm talking about surrealist art, what do I mean? Well, surrealism is defined as an artist wanted to almost bypass all the real-world elements to dive straight into that illogical liminal vibe. Now, with this definition, you can already see the similarities between surrealist works and indie horror video games, which I'll be talking about today. So, in this video, I'll be talking about 3 artists, 3 games, and trying to connect them together and explain how indie horror games are just an extension from surrealist artworks, and in the words of Philip DeFranco,
and let's just jump into it.
So this is Avery Palmer. You've probably seen his artwork on the internet. He's one of the more popular surrealist artists of our time. I find that Palmer's work feels cold. His figures are posed in a stiff way, and all of his paintings have the face of Michael Ehrmantraut. The backgrounds are always really empty too, with a tree or two and gray skies. I love the fact that nothing in his paintings ever really connects. They're uncomfortable because they withhold any sort of information from you. Let's take, for example, Mythical Beast. It shows a 2-headed beast, impossibly shaped, that stands in front of a tree with a man on top, next to a doghouse and this caterpillar-looking dude, all while standing on a cake. What does this mean? Fuck if I know. And that's the feeling that's really portrayed through all of his work. Palmer's work fills me with this weird tension that I can never really shake, not necessarily in like a overtly spooky way though, it's almost uncanny valley. There's something that's really refreshing in this, especially in this new age of goofy shock value analog horror bullshit. His work fills the same uncanny feeling as my new favorite indie horror game, Squirrel Stapler. Quite the name, I know. Squirrel Stapler is a short indie horror game made by David
Szymanski
and released as a part of the Dread X collection too. So this game, as the title suggests, is about stapling squirrels to a dead body. You play as a man living alone in the woods. Inside your cabin, there's a dead body fixed to the wall. The game suggests that this is your dead wife, and your character believes that if he staples enough squirrels to her body, something will happen. This goes directly in contrast to the goat of the woods word, which saith, "Thou shalt not staple squirrels." I cannot make this shit up. Anyways, the game is split into 5 days. Day 1 is pretty standard stuff, grabbing your rifle, hunting down some squirrels. Day 2 is where larger animals start to appear. They're a little slower, but they're easy to shoot. As you come back to your cabin, you find an eerie note. Day 3 begins with you noting that something's been scratching your windows and brings with it larger predators, big red bears that explode when you shoot them. And it ends with your wife sat by the kitchen table. Day 4 has these weird squirrel facts. Squirrels are always watching. Squirrels can debone a human male in under 3 hours. Your wife appears behind you. You go to sleep. You wake up the next day. Squirrel fact, there are more squirrels than you have bullets, and you have made him very, very angry. You keep playing as usual, and eventually a countdown starts. God is coming. Now, for preface, you know this from the very beginning. On day 1, it's slathered onto the cabin wall in red paint. In 5 days, God is coming. It never changes. You pass it each morning, probably ignoring it, until day 5 when it clicks. And as this countdown ticks down to your inevitable doom, this ensemble of voices starts. That's it. That's the game. So what makes Squirrel Stapler and Palmer's paintings so memorable is how they refuse to give you all the information you need to figure out what they're truly about. Palmer does this through his use of stiff, blank-faced characters placed impossibly in a world that's devoid of any order or life, while Squirrel Stapler throws you into that uncanny world. One thing I do want to point out about Squirrel Stapler is the audio. There's no music, and apart from a cheery jingle you hear at the beginning of every night, there's seldom any audio effects. You hear the rustle of your footsteps, chatter of squirrels, and the squelch of stapling squirrels onto a corpse. This is a direct extension, in my opinion, of Palmer's work. Instead of staring and analyzing a Palmer painting, you're physically moving through and hearing one all around you. That uncanniness is really what pushes Palmer and Squirrel Stapler together. On to our next artist. Heads up, this guy's really into body horror. His paintings are honestly some of the more truly disturbing artworks I've seen in a while. And if you're not into that, or just not into body horror in general, feel free to skip to this next section. Still with me? Nice. Let's take a second, maybe dim the lights, let things get quiet for a bit. There's something about Ken Currie's work that feels like it doesn't want to be seen. Like if you look at it, something bad will happen. His work has a way of particularly unnerving me. I feel like if I stare at his work for too long, it'll reach out and take me in with it. Currie has said that he's interested in the tension between flesh and spirit, and you can feel that in how his figures seem almost haunted by their own physicality. Even when it's just one person in the frame, there's this overpowering sense of horror. The horror of what they've unfortunately become. His work is also influenced a lot by war, the gritty aftermath of what happens to people because of wartime. Take, for example, Hiroshima Smile. I feel like this painting speaks for itself.
Don't never buy no weed from the gas station, bro.
Now that we've taken a look at Currie's work, it's time to talk about Duck Season. So, Duck Season is a first-person VR horror game developed by Stress Level Zero. You play as a kid in the 80s who just got the hit new game Duck Season. This game is just a blatant duck hunt ripoff. You shoot the ducks on screen, that's about it. The game isn't really as gameplay heavy as Squirrel Stapler, but the story is really where it shines. You can actually go through the whole game like this and you won't encounter any spooky stuff. You just go to bed, sneak downstairs, and play the greatest video game of all time, Final Fiesta. Your mom does give you this hint though.
But you know, I would have shot that annoying dog.
So, as a normal human being, you go ahead and shoot the dog. This is where things start to change. First, it's the small things. The dog lingers in the corner of the screen. You can see him smoking cigarettes. Weird, but you can put that aside. Eventually, you catch the dog in the real world, filming you outside your window. You can turn around in-game to see the dog behind you sometimes too. These creepy things culminate into this scene where your mom lay on the floor covered in red ketchup, and this huge boss fight starts. Now, after you defeat the dog in the game, you're transported back to the real world. And this is where you can initiate the dead ending. The dog chases at you with a knife, and usually you shoot him and he dies and you win. But if you let him kill you, this happens. I'm low-key lazy, so I'm just gonna play this shit out for you. Shocking, right? What makes both Ken Currie's paintings and Duck Season's dead ending so unsettling isn't just their content though. Currie's work dwells in the space between life and death. His figures feel like remnants or bodies caught in the middle of transformation. Their distorted flesh and haunted expressions tell a story of something that's already happened. The horror is largely contained in the stillness of his paintings. They just dwell in this awesomely creepy way. Currie's work is brimming with this type of horror, but Duck Season also works on that same principle. It shows you the aftermath of violence just like Currie does. I think it's almost clinical in the way it depicts violence. This detachment forces you to confront the emotional residue of trauma instead of actually being distracted by gore. Duck Season takes on the concept of the body as a vessel spiritually. It blurs the line between the virtual and real worlds. There's even an ending that makes you stuck in the game world. I can't think of a better allegory than that. My main point, however, is both works oppose Palmer and Squirrel Stapler tonally. Currie and Duck Season don't hide what's going on and make you sit in the truth of what's happened. They deal with the horror of what remains after violence. Opposite to this, Palmer and Squirrel Stapler make you scared by not telling you anything at all. They're just weird. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna be completely honest. I have no idea how to segue to the next part, so I'm just gonna ask ChatGPT. So, Tetsuya Ishida. I love his work. He didn't paint like gore or violence, but his work is just as disturbing. It's a bit more quiet and subdued than Currie. Most of his subjects are men embedded into things. Literally. Machines, desks, boxes, structures. The best way I can describe it is that his work showcased people who were okay with being nothing, in a sense. His scenes take place in institutional spaces like classrooms and offices, but they don't feel neutral. They're always somewhat obtuse in their form, as if built to contain you. When people appear in his paintings, they don't resist this transformation. They just seem dissociated. There's no struggle or anything, they just accept their fate. That's where the horror is. It's horror in people learning to keep functioning in a system that couldn't care less if they live or die. That's what makes it effective. This is my favorite work of his. It's untitled, but it shows a bunch of boys with no legs. Instead, they're fitted into shopping bags. They're rather gross in their appearance, dirty and lounging around this room. But I can't help but feel weirdly calm when I look at this, just as much as I am creeped the fuck out. Ishida's style is pretty well controlled. He doesn't exaggerate or lean super into surrealism for its own sake. The surrealism comes from people becoming parts of processes, the roles flattened into tools. It's efficient for some, but detrimental for others. That's what I think makes this uncomfortable feeling stick. Another game that encapsulates this is the Exit 8. Listen, this is the loosest of connections, but I really want to talk about these things, okay? I'll try my best to connect these. Anyways, the Exit 8 is a simple indie horror game that places you in a single underground Japanese subway tunnel. The environment is sterile. White walls, harsh lightings, and signs directing you towards the Exit 8. At first glance, it looks like a normal subway tunnel. You move towards the exit, but soon you find yourself back where you started. The hallway loops. Where have I seen this before? You keep moving through the same place, but over time you notice small differences. A sign might be flipped the wrong way, a door cracked open, or maybe it's a little more obvious. These changes are subtle and easy to miss, and if you fail to catch those inconsistencies, the game resets you to the beginning of the corridor, trapping you in a cycle. The game doesn't explain what's happening. There's no enemies, like 2 jump scares, and no direct threats other than being reset. Instead, the Exit 8 forces you to question your own perception. You start to doubt whether you actually saw a weird sign or strange anomaly, or if your memory is playing tricks. The repetition and subtle shift creates this psychological trap where you're unsure if the environment is changing or if you're just gaslighting yourself. Much like Tetsuya Ishida's paintings, the Exit 8 explores horror through the experience of routine and control. The corridor, like Ishida's societies, don't care if you live or die or fail or succeed. The space isn't hostile in a traditional way. It's mostly not trying to harm you. It's scary because it's indifferent. You're caught in a system that's meant to keep moving forward whether you want to or not. The Exit 8 feels more like a test than a traditional horror experience. The dread comes from realizing you're not alone in a place that will never bend to your will. The sterile environment creates a feeling of paranoia born out of monotony. Tetsuya Ishida's paintings in the Exit 8 show systems that slowly wear people down until they break. In the Exit 8, you're being mentally absorbed into the corridor trying to find anomalies just as much as Ishida's characters are literally absorbed into their environment. Both focus on routine as a form of control and horror too. The horror comes from endless repetition and subtle changes. I feel like we all have felt this dread, if it's through a dead-end job or the constant feeling of waking up and every day slowly blurring into each other. The difference though is that Ishida's paintings show people having already given up. If you push through the Exit 8, you can emerge victorious. But what happens when you give up? When you close the game out of frustration? How are you any better than the people in Ishida's work? So, okay, this whole thing is pretty sporadic, so how does this all tie together? Well, these artists and games are all part of a tradition. one with the surrealist movement's goal to break free from logic to reveal raw, often uncomfortable emotions lurking below the surface. Palmer and Squirrel Stapler, Currie and Duck Season, Ishida and Exit 8. Indie horror games invite us into spaces where the surrealist movement's goals can be facilitated. Beyond jump scares and gore, indie horror crafts moods and atmospheres that are unsettling and deeply personal. Instead of just staring at a painting or getting spooked by traditional horror games, you inhabit these surrealist worlds through the media of indie horror. You can actually experience horror in the way that the surrealist artists of the past could not have even comprehended. So yeah, indie horror games are just the next evolution of surrealist art using interactivity to pull us inside of surrealist realities where the line between dream and waking life blurs. That's all I got. Bye!